Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome back to another video over here on That's Comical. And if you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. Andy and I are fresh off about 2 weeks now from Free Comic Book Day 2025. That was definitely a lot of fun getting to the local store and checking out a whole bunch of things and walking away with a whole bunch of different things, which is even better. But I'm glad that Andy and I are back tonight for another episode of The Ultimate Journey. Andy, I'm hoping that you're excited for another recording.
Definitely, I always am. I think, as usual, we've got a good one tonight.
Yeah, so tonight we're going to be discussing The Road to Secret Wars 2015, and we're going to be talking about a very small story, two small stories, as a matter of fact, that take place after a major Marvel Ultimate Universe event. Now, I think the right thing to do is to talk a little bit about said event because there are a great many people who say that the event called Ultimatum was the pivotal juncture of the Ultimate Universe. It was basically something that caused a major shakeup in this alternate Marvel universe and basically plowed the stories forward in very different and very original directions, giving us stories that we had never seen before, as well as giving us characters that we had never seen before. But also a lot of people will say that Ultimatum was the story that sort of gave us the end of the golden age, because even though there was a lot of interesting things taking place after Ultimatum, a lot of people were not 100% satisfied with where they went.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. And I think it's so part of the reason that we're doing these stories in our journey to Secret Wars, which we'll get into, I think is that Ultimatum as an event would have had a lot of reading going into it, in addition to the core books. And it really is a Ultimate Universe event that, as we'll see as we go to Secret Wars, it's less important everything that happened in the Ultimate Universe, the same way we're not reading absolutely everything that's going on in our classic
Exactly.
616 universe right now, right? So instead, we're taking a look at this kind of coda to the big event, looking at how some of the key players who are going to impact us in particular moving forward are coming out of it and what their teams look like now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to the credit of Ultimatum, I will definitely say what really does stand out about Ultimatum, I will probably say, is the artwork and imagery. I mean, it's a story that's written by Geoff Loeb. It's illustrated by David Finch and Danny Mickey. I mean, Danny Mickey, we've already praised based on his work on Ultimate Fantastic Four. But the truth of the matter is, based on where we were with the Ultimate Universe, and then hearing that Ultimates 2 came out, and of course, Mark Miller and Brian Hitch were on that story as well, and then Ultimates 3, which was basically an Ultimates volume cut in half. There were only 5 issues to Ultimates Volume 3, and even Mark Miller left the book and Geoff Loeb took it over.
Mm-hmm.
He basically gave us the murdering of Magneto's children. And because of the fact that that happened, Magneto officially loses it, and he does like the ultimate evil deed, which is something that the 616 Magneto probably in his wildest dreams would have never thought about doing, in which he actually alternates the axis of the Earth, causing cataclysmic events to happen, including New York City basically going underwater. So it basically, if you want the long and the short of it of Ultimatum, it's basically like a Game of Thrones episode. Once upon a time, everybody died at the end. That's basically what happens in Ultimatum. But I'm not going to deny the fact that there are some beautiful images within those books.
Mm-hmm.
The artwork is without a doubt stunning. There's some very disturbing moments in that book, specifically something that happens with Wasp, and I'm not going to get into anything further than that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a crucial piece of the reading in regards to the Road to Secret Wars and the Ultimate Journey, as well as reading the Ultimate Universe. But we're going to go over something called Ultimate Requiem. Ultimate Requiem actually had three separate volumes. There was Ultimate Requiem, Ultimate Spider-Man Requiem, which is actually 2 volumes. It was actually a good piece written by Brian Michael Bendis with amazing artwork by Mark Bagley and Stuart Immonen. That's good stuff there, as well as a Ultimate Fantastic Four single shot. And there is also an X-Men one shot, but honestly, I didn't have the necessary feeling that I should read the X-Men book. Nobody really talks about it. A lot of people really reference Ultimatum, Requiem, Spider-Man, and Fantastic Four because of what happens in those books. And for the Road to Secret Wars, it's kind of crucial.
Yeah. And I'll say, so we always talk about additional reading and all that stuff on this channel. I went ahead and read the X-Men one shot too, just because like a lot of these things, I'm reading them in bound up collections, so it was there in the book. I read it too. You are fine to skip it for what we're doing now, but if you are doing something reading through like the Ultimate Universe, I think it's really important to see how the X-Men have been impacted by, on a personal level, by an event that was kicked off with a mutant-centric story, and the way that they are licking their wounds and dealing with the losses that they've had. So it's a fine book, a decent story, but one that really is only going to matter to you if you are doing a deep, deep, deep dive into the Ultimate Universe or Ultimate X-Men in particular. So
Exactly.
I mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will say, in regards to the Requiems, Spider-Man is probably not as important as Fantastic Four based on the endings that they have and where the stories go. However, I am definitely going to say that Ultimate Requiem Spider-Man is by far my favorite of the two.
Yeah. So just
I
to
think it's
jump
a
in, I
beautiful, I think
agree.
it's a
Yeah.
beautifully written story by Brian Michael Bendis.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot just to I know so much of when we're doing this series is kind of focused on the why, right? I like to talk about like here's why this is important, here's what that story is. But just to like do a little break, kind of like we would with a must be read, to like give my thoughts on this one. I thought that the Spider-Man story as a whole was very touching. And there's some really bleak imagery. You know, we talked about how brutal the Ultimatum event is, and it's one that more so than Fantastic Four, I feel like lets you kind of sit in what this destroyed New York is, and deal with people who are actively in mourning, while in that world. So I was a big, big fan of that story. Obviously, it's fun to get our whole like, Avengers, big fights, all of that kind of thing. But like, if you're gonna talk about what makes this great, you talk about J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important part to say about, especially the first issue of the two-parter, is the fact that Spider-Man is barely in it. And one of
Yeah.
the few things that I always love, even though it's not necessarily a fan favorite amongst many readers, when I read an issue of a certain comic and the main character is not in it, I am always curious to see what is the writer going to do to
Mhm.
tell the reader, even though your main character is not in this book, this is still a very important and very well done story that I'm trying to tell you. And
Yeah.
I love the fact that the story revolves around J. Jonah Jameson specifically having flashbacks of his personal observances of Spider-Man, his perceiving of Spider-Man in other outlets of the media,
Mhm.
and finally realizing, how does he truly feel about this mysterious hero?
Yeah.
Is this guy really the monster that he always claims him to be? Or has he been wrong all this time? And he starts that by going back to the Daily Bugle, because after an event like Ultimatum, you would expect him back in the Daily Bugle, excuse the pun, by hell or high water, he would be at the Daily Bugle afterwards. And he just goes into his office and he goes onto his computer and he starts to type a story about Spider-Man and how he actually thinks at the end of the day, Spider-Man is truly a hero.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a touching thing to get to read. And to like the frame of seeing him think through these stories that he regrets how he had presented it in the past and thinking through it and how his perspective has shifted with the reality before him. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful book. I really, really enjoyed it. And so to the extent it matters, I mean, we're not talking about many books here at all. Like you have
Yeah.
time to read them all. This just on its own face to read, this was my favorite of the two.
But how did you feel about that other story? Because it didn't really seem to me that the story about Spider-Man and Iron Man teaming up to stop Lady Hydra. I think it was really more about him knowing that Mary Jane was over there getting interviewed by Tony Stark, and he was like, I gotta make sure that she's okay.
Yeah, that's
But that's
that's the
Spider-Man.
main thing. That's the main thing.
It's
What I make
Peter.
of, yeah, it's making it, make sure that she's okay. But it really it's also one of those like kind of the framing into Hydra. And then even in the next book, kind of the broader Avengers struggles and like the Hulk and all of that kind of stuff. All of that is really secondary to the frame of J. Jonah Jameson reflecting on how he had presented these things before. I would say that particularly that first book has more ramifications for continuing to read the Ultimate Universe as a whole,
Yes,
than it does. That's kind of like the look forward thing that a good kind of, a coda story like this Requiem will be doing for people who are reading forward. We're reading the Ultimate Universe in a very specific and very weird way, entirely focused on how it ends and not as much what happens within it. But for that reason, for our purposes in this journey, it's the frame of this one that matters so much.
exactly. Because at the end of the first issue, he gets interrupted, J. Jonah Jameson, by Robbie, who basically says to him, J. Jonah Jameson, you're not actually writing a story about Spider-Man. You're writing his obituary. Apparently, he's dead.
Hmm.
And that's, of course, like something. And the I think my favorite part about that is the response of J. Jonah Jameson. It's all done in a facial expression
Yeah.
and how shocked and upset he is apparently now that this guy who he's been pinning as a menace for so long, he realized, oh my God, I finally realized him as a hero, and now all of a sudden he's no longer the hero that we need him to be. And then you're right. Then we go into the second issue, and that's definitely a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, I think once again, the artwork is gorgeous. The scene, I absolutely love the splash pages and the action sequences in the flashback of Spider-Man against the Hulk, just
Yeah.
because the ink and the colors are absolutely gorgeous. Like the brightest of blue skies on a bridge, the beautiful shade of green of the Hulk, the flashy yellow school bus. Like that is such a beautiful piece of the book to look at.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely. No, that's really the point of it, to kind of give you that big like look back on Spider-Man and what the character means. Um, but what when I reflect on the story, what I'm thinking about is near the end when we cut back to what J. Jonah Jameson is writing. Um, a man child as eager to capture a purse snatcher as he is to go up against whatever kinds of macabre this city has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's, coming to terms with that, and it's saying something about Spider-Man that he has never said
Exactly. And
before
through that
this.
process, what
Yeah.
makes that scene even deeper is while he's actually saying those words, that's when the Avengers are actually uncovering survivors from the debris of New York City. And then the last page, they find him and they say, guys, he's alive, he's breathing. And that's
Yep.
just a beautiful way to cap it all off. I mean, thankfully, the flashback with the Hulk, at least the Hulk wasn't pining over Freddie Prinze Jr. going out with Betty Ross.
Yeah, and thankfully that's the last time Spider-Man will die in the Ultimate Universe. I'm really glad we dodged that bullet.
Yeah.
Um,
So then we get into Fantastic Four Requiem, and it's definitely a similar kind of story because it's a story about grief, it's a story about reflection, but it's a very different kind of story because of the fact that the Storm Children have officially lost their father in the flood, and Johnny is very much torn because of the fact that he did not have a really decent discussion with his father the last time they saw him. They had a little bit of an argument about
Yeah.
his father not really appreciating the fact that, Johnny is a special guy. He's got powers, and yet you seem to be walking around just like a regular schlump and just taking everything for granted.
Hmm.
And they just
Hmm.
get into a heated argument because Johnny's trying to prove him wrong, and then he can't go back to see his dad again because his dad's unfortunately gone.
Yeah. And it's similar to what we were saying about Spider-Man, that it's that human emotional element that is the thing that sticks out for you when you read the story. Obviously, in this one, there's a little bit more of a call forward to why we are reading these stories right now for Secret Wars, which we'll get into also.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think about just this book in isolation as what it means for the Fantastic Four, I'm thinking, this is Marvel's first family, right? And
Yeah.
they're gonna have their low moments. And when you think about that Marvel magic that all those years ago Fantastic Four was able to start to show these flawed heroes that really lit a fire under the comic industry and made people think about what you could tell in these otherwise childish books. We've seen like the full blossoming of that idea at this point, well, with where we
Yeah.
are with what Fantastic Four do, that these are children mourning a father.
Yeah, and then
Like that's
and I just wanted to piggyback a teeny bit on what you were saying earlier.
yeah,
And then, of course, when the Ultimate Universe gives their rendition of the Fantastic Four, they really give you an excellent version of Marvel's first family, but they give it to you in such a brand new, fresh way,
yeah,
and at the same time, still holding on to those very few elements that reminds you of that classic Marvel First Family, which is what makes that book, I think, extremely special. But
yeah,
it's a really sad thing in Ultimatum, Requiem, Fantastic Four, because what happens at the end of this issue is the fact that the Fantastic Four seem to be no more.
just
Because one
split.
of the that's heartbreaking. And again, I felt the exact same way while we were earlier on the ultimate journey to Secret Wars and we were reading Civil War. And the fact that during Civil War, the Fantastic Four literally splits into two, and Johnny goes to the hospital, and Reed and Sue have a major fallout, possibly that could end in separation or divorce. We don't know. But
Mhm.
it's just like you just don't want that to happen. You want them to get back together. And it seems at the end of Civil War that they seem to build those bridges once again. But this time, Sue is so angry with Reed because of what Reed is. And that's the problem. She was I don't know if she was right or wrong, but one of the few things that, as Fantastic Four fans, we all know what is the problem with Reed Richards. He doesn't know how to stop being Reed Richards,
Yep,
the smartest man alive. His brain is constantly in motion. That hamster is not going to stop running anytime soon. If that
yeah,
hamster stops running, it means that Reed Richards is dead.
yeah,
But he's always thinking, and he's always lost in his work. And Sue is angry about the fact that he got lost in his work in regards to all the events that were happening.
yeah.
And it's not that he meant any harm, but unfortunately, especially when it comes to whether they're dating or whether they're married couples, like what are those two words that every man has to think about when it comes to their other? It's yes, dear. Don't piss the woman off. Don't do it.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, at the end of this story, we have all gone our separate ways. The Fantastic Four has split for all intents and purposes. Reed is left with nothing.
Yeah.
I mean,
He gets
everybody else
yeah.
is lost and finding, but there is no guiding light for Reed
Yeah.
anymore at the end of this story.
Yeah.
It's
Because what's
it's a
the last
disaster.
because the nail in the coffin is when the family goes to visit the grave of Johnny and Sue's father.
Yeah.
And I will definitely say again, this is Reed being Reed. You don't propose to your girlfriend at a funeral or at a
Yeah.
gravesite. You just don't do that. So the fact that Sue just up rejected him, didn't even want to have a conversation that was more than 2 minutes. It's heartbreaking, yes, as Fantastic Four fans, but in real life, you don't do that. You
Yeah.
just don't do that. If
Yeah.
you do something like that, you're going to get what you deserve.
Yep.
And unfortunately, Sue is going to regret the fact that she did that somewhere down the line.
Yeah, probably. Reed is left with absolutely nothing. And when we see him return home,
Yeah.
having just in this journey done the first issues of Ultimate Fantastic Four, we know what Reed's home life was like as a kid in high school.
Yeah, his
It was
dad didn't care
awful.
for him. His
He
dad
was
didn't care for him, and
mistreated
his
there.
mom coddled him.
Mom called him, dad didn't care for him. Everybody wanted him out of the house. They would rather he be gone than there. And the only shining part of his life was Ben.
And that's another thing. Is it just me? Because I cannot remember for my life what Ben did in this entire book. He sort of was like lost out of the other four, out of the other three members of the Fantastic Four. Like they gave him the least amount of story.
They gave him the least amount of on-screen story.
Because
But
the one thing that we know one thing about Ben. He may look the way he is, but the what that they call him the ever-loving blue-eyed thing for a reason. He's got a heart of gold.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
got a heart of gold. So even if he's not on the pages of the book, you know exactly what Ben is thinking and you know exactly how Ben is feeling.
You know everything you need to know about Ben's contribution to the book on the page where he gets off the jet, walks into the castle, walks out of the castle, and then doesn't say another word until he's at the funeral. Hey, it's
Mhm.
he goes through a lot, and a lot is put on him. What was the line? It's Reed says you really carried the weight of the team on your shoulders on this one. He says, "Yeah, well, my shoulders hurt." And that's where we leave Ben at the end of this, wanting just
Yeah.
out and being done, feeling like he has done it. He has betrayed himself, and he has lost his family in the
Yeah.
process of what has happened outside of his control. He's done
Yeah.
everything he possibly could to keep it together, and it wasn't enough. So he has to make the decision to help himself. But does he? It's tough. They end this book in an incredibly dark place, and
Yeah.
somehow Reed is the one with the least left.
Yeah, but I mean, I also think that I kind of love the last pages of the book just because of the fact that you literally see it's ingenious. You see all four members of the team on one single page, but there are panel lines all throughout separating all four of them. I think
Yeah.
that it's subtle, but it's absolutely brilliant. It's a
Yeah.
brilliant way to end that book perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's the one page summation of we are not where we started. It's it's difficult to see. And that's we talk a lot about the kind of stories that we choose to read on this channel are the ones that benefit from having consumed prior content. And in this one, this is the kind of story that really hits home better when you have a level of familiarity with the Fantastic Four. It breaks your heart too when you see this page, when you're invested in Marvel's First Family.
Yeah. And by the way, I think what the most interesting thing for me is um Ultimatum Spider-Man Requiem. That's actually the first Spider-Man Ultimate Universe book that I ever picked up and read. I
Really
didn't
cool.
actually read any of Ultimate Spider-Man up until this point. I mean, I don't
Interesting.
know why, because I mean, Ultimate Spider-Man is where the Ultimate Universe starts, and you're also talking to someone who hasn't read a single issue of Ultimate X-Men either.
Yeah, yeah,
And I don't know why I don't, because of the fact that Mark Miller did write the book, and I am a very big Mark Miller fan.
yeah.
But I just don't have any interest in reading that book for some reason.
Okay.
I mean, I think one of the most interesting things was Mark Miller even admitted, he said, they gave me Ultimate X-Men. He said, I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I never read an X-Men book in my life.
Yeah.
But for Spider-Man, no. I mean, I know people love Brian Michael Bendis' work on that book, but I did not read a single Ultimate Spider-Man issue until I read this.
Yeah, crazy.
And I haven't,
Well,
and I still have, outside of what we're going to read in the future regarding Spider-Man, that's the Ultimate Universe Spider-Man I've read.
yeah, and I will say that is crazy to me to think about, but also it's an interesting point to come into because it's actually one of the parts of Ultimate Spider-Man that like relies the least on having a connection specifically to the Ultimate Universe version of Peter. You know, this story just works as someone who's a fan of Spider-Man. You know,
And
like
that's the thing. That you're making a great point there, because
yeah,
I was wondering, knowing some of the parts of Ultimate Spider-Man that I was going to read later on, which we're definitely going to be discussing here on the channel for the Ultimate Journey, I was wondering if I was going to be lost when I
uh-huh.
started reading these Ultimate Spider-Man issues, and the answer is definitely not.
No, no.
I think it's just because of how embedded Spider-Man is in my love of superheroes and comic books. I know
Yeah.
Spider-Man backwards and forwards, even if I barely read a book.
Yeah, this story trades in knowing who Spider-Man is, why he matters, and what his relationship with J. Jonah Jameson is in any form it has taken. In movies and comics and TV, you have an understanding of the id of these characters, and this particular, you know, one shot, two shot, I guess, just works. It just
Yeah.
works.
And
Yeah.
if you want to see one of our previous videos, we actually have not done a character profile in such a long time, but we did do one on Spider-Man on his 60th anniversary, and we pretty much covered all the Spider-Man ground you could possibly imagine.
Wow, we must have been doing this for longer than I realized because straight up I have no memory of that video and I'm probably gonna go watch it when we're
We
done
actually
recording.
filmed it in your house.
I knew that was gonna be the next thing you were gonna say. But I have no memory of it. I'm gonna watch it after this.
Yeah, I think we've been making comic book content, well, at least me doing most of it, starting it all. I've been doing this for like 5 years now.
Yeah, that's probably right. That's
Yeah.
probably right. The kids weren't born yet. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, the kids weren't born yet. What was like? What was life
We
like back
filmed
then?
in what is now James's bedroom. What was my was
Yeah,
my
that is kind of
comic
funny.
office? Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's gonna really wrap up this video. It wasn't gonna be a very long video because there really wasn't much to discuss. We are definitely looking forward to the next chapter of the Ultimate Journey. We're still very much now at the midpoint of the second arc of the Ultimate Journey to Secret Wars. And we're now officially heading into the final phase. And we're going to be reading some very intense stories that are really going to shape the Ultimate Universe for what it is until it's officially no more. And then we're going to go right back into the 616 and we're going to get into some real nitty gritty stuff, because just in case you guys don't remember where we left off there's only 198 mutants left in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
the superheroes are very much divided, and Captain America is dead.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a
We've
lot
left
to
them in a
do.
rough place.
We're in a very rough place. Now the Ultimate Universe is in a rough place.
True.
Anyway, everybody, thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment in the box below. Let us know if you've read these Ultimate Requiem books. Let us know what your thoughts are on Ultimatum. I'm really curious to know, because as I said, it's a beautifully drawn book, but the story itself, I think, is a little too over the top and really not too much to write home about. A lot of people say that. But
Mm-hmm.
don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest content, and we will see you in the next one.